Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, directed and co-written by J.J. Abrams, takes place not long after the events of The Last Jedi, where the Resistance is attempting to restore peace and harmony to the galaxy. The First Order under Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is attempting to enforce its rule of the galaxy, but an old player emerges in Emperor Palpatine. The Emperor has some plans of his own, so Rey and the crew attempt to put a stop to him on the final journey of the Skywalker saga. Alright, so if you're new to this channel and you haven't seen some of my other videos, you probably don't know that I'm a really big Star Wars fan, but if you have seen my other videos, you're probably well aware by now. But I do like to make it clear that Star Wars is a pretty important part of my life. I mean, I have several Star Wars costumes for which I'm actually in the 501st Legion, so I do charity events and stuff like that. I mean, I have a lot of Star Wars collectibles. Star Wars is just, like I said, a pretty important part of my life, if I'm being honest. But no matter how deep your fandom is, I believe it's important to be objective about your interpretations of art. And I think a lot of other people feel the same way. You know, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or whatever else, I think it's important, you know, for people to go into a film and not already make up their mind about it before it begins. I've been super excited to see Rise of Skywalker because I've been looking forward to seeing, you know, how the Skywalker saga will end and how they can create a hopefully climactic conclusion for our new and old characters. I think that's what J.J. Abrams did here, because what he did here, I think, is really impressive. Does the film have a few issues? Yeah, it does. But overall, I found Rise of Skywalker to be a very satisfying conclusion to the saga and an exciting emotional journey through and through. I think you're going to hear a lot of reviewers tell you that if you like The Last Jedi, you probably won't like this film. And if you hated The Last Jedi, you're going to love this film. I think that's a fair claim because most of Episode 9 is basically the opposite of Episode 8. I mean, there's a lot of fan service, there's more that plays to the core, the history, and the roots of Star Wars, and there's less subversion going on. And, you know, I've stated before my opinion on The Last Jedi, and that's always been a controversial film. But in my opinion, you know, it pales in comparison to The Force Awakens and throws a lot away of what Episode 7 did. But I still did enjoy Last Jedi for what it was, despite its issues. But I can't deny that I think this trilogy could have been better had there been, you know, a roadmap for which, you know, they wanted to follow and a way they wanted the trilogy to actually go. It does seem that Lucasfilm was figuring out many things as, you know, as they were going, instead of like outlining a trilogy and following that plan and roadmap and sticking to it. Rian Johnson's vision was obviously very, very different from J.J. Abrams, which is why The Rise of Skywalker feels like more of a sequel to The Force Awakens than it does, you know, a sequel to The Last Jedi. Most of the decisions Rian Johnson made are taken in a completely different direction this time around, almost to the point where a lot of The Last Jedi is kind of irrelevant at this point. So my criticism of that would be, you know, more specific to the overall trilogy and not so much to The Rise of Skywalker, which did feel very much like a course correction for the franchise. But overall, I like the places they took the characters. I mean, Daisy Ridley is the best she's ever been as Rey, as she shows off, you know, that charm and charisma and some amazing feats as our protagonist. I think that what they do with Rey in this film is great because you actually feel that internal conflict with her this time around like you did in The Force Awakens. And ultimately, I think this film provides a little bit more development for Rey in a way that I found satisfying. Adam Driver is, of course, awesome and still the best part of the sequel trilogy in my eyes. His character is more badass than ever in this film, and you can actually tell that his powers and even his ruthlessness have grown since the last film. Adam Driver plays the character with an anger that's palpable because you can feel him constantly trying to prove himself to those around him. He's also an even better fighter this time around and makes for some truly badass scenes involving Kylo Ren, and the Knights of Ren for that matter, which were a cool addition to the film, I think. But on a separate note, it is important to keep in mind that Rise of Skywalker does move at a very brisk pace. I mean, there's action like every other scene, and this is something that not everyone is going to enjoy. I mean, I actually found Rise of Skywalker to be the Star Wars version of Avengers Infinity War. It felt like a bunch of characters in the universe coming together to face a common enemy, and there's battle scenes like every 15 to 20 minutes with some character stuff mixed in between. I mean, there's aspects of Endgame mixed in there too, but I found the pacing of the film and the overall narrative and the structure to feel familiar. I think the main difference between all these films being that Infinity War did a better job of setting up the overarching plot and putting the pieces in place, whereas Rise of Skywalker, you know, just had to figure things out on the go due to the way The Last Jedi went. But structurally, I found the two films similar, the main difference being also that Rise of Skywalker is almost setting itself up rather than having like 20 movies to do that beforehand. I like the pace of this film though because I was never bored, all the action scenes look fantastic, and some of the battles were absolutely jaw-dropping. That's the best way to describe them. I think from an excitement standpoint, Rise of Skywalker definitely delivers. I mean, the action, among other things, are aided by John Williams' awesome score, and that's an obvious one once again. Star Wars films, have that unique identity in every film, in large part due to their iconic scores that John Williams continues to produce. I mean, sadly, this was the last one, but nonetheless, it's awesome. And there's so much to touch on in this review because of the sheer amount of things happening in the film, but I'm going to go try to see the film again and then do a spoiler review for you guys. But for now, I'm going to continue to keep this spoiler free and as general as I can so I don't go into anything I shouldn't that you'll be mad at me about. So one of my problems with Rise of Skywalker is the sheer amount of exposition. Since there's so much to accomplish by the end of the film, the characters will just, have to explain so much of the plot and the backstory and just other pieces of important information to each other. This is helpful info that the audience needs, but after a while, it can begin to feel like there's so much being explained rather than shown. And this again is likely a product of how JJ scrapped basically everything The Last Jedi set up. And how, in order for the audience to actually understand what's happening, the characters need to reveal and explain things. So I just found there to be a lot of exposition dumps happening, which can be a bit frustrating at times. And on the flip side of that, I think that there's also some confusing things happening in the context of the overall saga. Not so much in the film, but just what they mean for the saga itself. And there's definitely a lot of answers to questions that you likely had over the last few films, but those answers can also create questions in themselves. A term you're going to see tossed around a lot when Rise of Skywalker comes up is fan service. Fan service is always a tricky subject because some won't have a problem with it because you get something you probably want to see. Others will say it comes at the expense of the story. I myself definitely agree that there's fan service in this film. To me, it's undeniable, but I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem with it because I was able to buy into the rationale of the decisions, and I'm also able to understand, the context for making them. The Last Jedi is easily the most divisive film in all of Star Wars. And clearly J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm wanted to make something the fans would enjoy and find more fitting to the Star Wars universe than The Last Jedi was. The film, in many ways, is the antithesis of The Last Jedi. It doesn't let old things die. It instead mixes them with new things to make something familiar yet fresh at the same time, much like The Force Awakens did. And while there are a lot of, crowd-pleasing moments, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving the fans something they want to see. I didn't find the decisions to be pandering or anything like that. Some of them may create some issues in the overall context of the saga, like I mentioned, but on first viewing, I didn't notice anything egregious where my alarms instantly went up. One of the other things I really liked about The Rise of Skywalker, though, was that the main crew in Rey, Finn, Poe, and Chewie were together for a lot of it. There's a lot of great chemistry in that team, and it was exciting to see them adventure together. C-3PO is also a part of that, and he does great things in this film, too. There's also some comedy mixed in, and C-3PO plays a part in that as well, in a Marvel-esque kind of way, but not too often where it feels overbearing or anything like that. This team, it felt like it had the camaraderie and the chemistry, which it always did, really, but we never really got to explore that because The Last Jedi separated everyone. Still, it works very well in this film. Now, the final thing to discuss, I think, is the Emperor. The Emperor's presence in this film is felt, and I think it definitely works. He's like the rest of the film, familiar yet different. I think a large factor in whether you enjoy the movie as a whole is whether you accept, the context and the new atmosphere of the film, and of course, the Emperor, which is all presented in the opening crawl. So I can't really go any more into it than that, but what I will say is that Rise of Skywalker is a satisfying conclusion overall to the Skywalker saga, and I had a great time with it. It does have some flaws here and there, but overall, I loved it. I think it's great. As for the pros-cons, for the pros, I think the action and visuals are outstanding. The characters are all great and well performed. The score by John Williams is excellent, and there's a great balance between the old and the new. As for the cons, I think there's a lot of exposition, and sometimes things move slightly too fast with too much going on. Overall, I'm going to give Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker a 9 out of 10, and definitely recommend you check it out in theaters if you're a fan of Star Wars. I'd recommend at least having watched some of the Star Wars films before going into this one. I wouldn't actually say that Last Jedi is essential, but The Force Awakens is, as well as some others, maybe the original trilogy at the very least. So did you guys see Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker yet? What did you think of it? And if not, let me know why not. Also, let me know your favorite Star Wars film. Now that the saga is complete, I think it's time we share our list and kind of explore that. It's all pretty fresh, but I'll be sharing mine in the comments below for you guys, and I can't wait to hear yours. Either way, this is WillFoxification signing off. See you guys in the next video.